subscribing to this Jaden's Videos, and today I am doing an unboxing, setup, and review on the Home Depot Halloween 2022 Goblin Thief, or as they changed the name to for some reason, Animated LED Goblin. This is one I've been wanting ever since I first saw pictures of it, and I'm so happy to finally have my hands on it. I love this thing so much because I love classic Halloween things, if you don't know me, and what's more classic Halloween than a goblin? I mean, they're always mentioned for Halloween, and they're always talked about in all sorts of Halloween songs and tales and stuff. Yet, for some odd reason, we never actually see representation of them in Halloween in a lot of forms. Like, we never see haunted houses with goblins. I've never seen someone dressed up as a goblin. And also, most importantly, in this case, we've only had one Goblin animatronic ever made 10 years ago at Spirit Halloween, which was the Poppin' Goblin, and that wasn't even a full life-size standing goblin. It was just a goblin that pops up from behind a jack-o'-lantern. Very strange to me, because when you think of Halloween, goblins are typically one of the first things that pop into your mind. However, for some reason, we never see them. And that's why I like this guy so much, because I've wanted a Goblin animatronic for years, and we finally have one, and he's a great one in my opinion. Here's his box, the cool Home Depot Halloween box with a purple background. All of the stuff that he does and all of that is right down here. It says assembly takes approximately 15 minutes. That is good. That should be very quick and easy. There's that side, and then the other side and the back is the same thing, and then the top shows a full picture of him. So let's get him open. Now this guy is made by Techie Design, or just Techie, which honestly surprised me because when I first saw pictures of him, I honestly thought he would be made by SBI because he looked like an SBI animatronic. However, you can tell that he's Techie not only from his voice acting, but his very startling jump scare, which I love. I love his jump scare. I think it's super cool. It's a very startling one indeed. Now he's got his instructions on the top there, which is interesting. Oh wow, there he is. Looking super cool. The first thing we're gonna pull out, oh, this is all one piece, so that's not gonna be the first thing we pull out. He's also got, oh, he's twist tied in here, so I'm actually gonna have to turn him over. Firstly, his feet, which I think are kind of cheap looking. They could look better. They're just a plastic. They look kind of cheap. I think they could definitely have done better on those, but they're not bad. I wouldn't say that at all. Here's his adapter. Pretty small adapter, actually. It's very interesting. So there's that. We're gonna take this out now. This is his burlap sack that he holds. Here it is. So that's just gonna come up like that, and I'd assume there's gonna be a frame that's going to go in there to keep that together. And he's got his hand already attached to it, and then this looks like a hip hoop. Pretty sure that's what that's going to be. And then we're going to save the body for last, probably. We have his module here. So on, off, foot pad, volume control, adapter jack, speaker jack, foot pad, and all the wires. And then this also looks like it's going to be part of his hip framing. I'm gonna put that aside because I don't want to look at it just yet. We got some poles. Those look like leg poles. These are probably to hold up the burlap sack, I would assume, to keep it in shape. There's his base, which is pretty wide because he sticks out kind of far. And one of the coolest things, the skull. You got the mechanism for the pop-up right there, and then of course you've got the spine and the skull, which this is where the spring is going to be, is in here, I'm pretty sure, to have that pop out. The skull could look a little bit better, but it's not horrible. It's just a basic skull. But I really like how it has the spinal cord to it. I think it looks pretty freaking cool. Definitely not least. Oh wait, we also have his pants. Those are separate. That's those. But here's the body with the clothing. He's so cool looking. So his hands are actually just attached to the other pieces. There he is, look at his face. Oh, I love it. He's such a cool Halloween looking goblin. He's so cool. I also love his medieval kind of era clothing. I think that looks great too. Here is the amazing Home Depot Halloween 2022 Goblin Thief animatronic set up in all of his glory. I really love this guy, like, a lot. I know a lot of people don't like him as much in person as they did in his online pictures and videos. I think he looks just as good, and I actually like him more because in person makes you realize how startling his animation is, which it is pretty startling. There are some that have a louder pop-up than the others. Mine isn't super loud, but it's still very fast, and I think will definitely scare quite a few people in whatever way you use it. He's so cool looking. He is about 4 feet tall, so he's not gigantic, but he's exactly how big a goblin should be. I mean, he's got a pretty big head, and he's got a pretty big width as he sticks out pretty far, but I think he's a great height for a goblin. He can fit in a lot of different themings too. Anything you're doing that's like a classic Halloween vibe or medieval, he could definitely work in. He can fit in a fantasy type thing. He can fit in a swamp. He can fit in even a farm possibly. You can kind of figure it out. But he fits a lot of different themes, and I think that's also a great thing about him. But also, he's just such a classic Halloween goblin that you can just use him in any Halloween decorating scenario. And I'm just so happy we finally got a goblin. His face looks really good. There's not a whole lot of paint detailing, but it does have some nice texture. His skin does. It looks kind of scaly, which I really like. Like I mentioned when I was unboxing him, I think it's a vinyl. I do not believe it's latex. He's got those long pointy ears, which I love. His teeth look super cool. Has that very goblin-like appearance. He's got a long pointy nose, and he's got those cool looking eyes, which also light up, which I can assume you can probably unplug those two if you don't want them to light up. But personally, I'm never usually a fan of light up eyes. However, I think they look good on this guy because it's a nice goblin type green. You've got his neck ruffle under there, which is fur, so it looks very medieval-like, very fantasy-like, and I think that fits the vibe of this animatronic very well. His hands are plastic and they look pretty cool. They're green, very Halloween monster-looking hands with those black fingernails. Look kind of like witch hands. I like them. Another theme this guy can fit in, anything to do with the witches I think can work, but that also goes kind of under the fantasy vibe. But yeah, you get the idea. He can fit in a lot of different things. The burlap sack is burlap, so it's pretty good quality, and it also stays up pretty well. I was afraid it would kind of collapse with the jump scare animation, but as long as you set it up properly, it stays up pretty well, which is a good thing. There's these flaps here on top of the burlap sack, these black flaps, which are technically supposed to go like this to cover up the skull when it's sunken down into the sack, which I may mention, this is not at all how the animatronic is when it's off. I just have it off like this for showcase purposes, and because it's always best to leave jump scare animatronics turned off in the up position to not sprain the motor. And so I just have him like this right now, but when he's plugged in, ready to be activated, the skull is going to be fully down in the burlap sack. And so that's what these black flaps are for, is to disguise it in there so you don't see it until he pulls it out. Unfortunately, they don't work very well because every time he pulls it out, it's going to move these out of the way and they're not not going to go back into position, and so it's not really going to cover it up too well. However, I feel like that's not too big of a deal because on Halloween or in a haunt or in a display or whatever, you're most likely going to be using him in the dark, and so the black definitely will make it blend in better, so I don't think it's too big of a deal. However, it kind of sucks that it doesn't cover it up fully, but I honestly can't think of what else they could have done for that. I just want to show a nice side view of him as well, just so you can see how far he sticks out. And you can see his feet at the bottom a little bit there, which I already showed when I was unboxing him. He sticks out pretty far, but it's not ridiculously far. He's not super big where you're going to have trouble finding a place to put him, but he does stick out kind of far, so keep that in mind. One thing I don't like about his posture is how his back sticks out like that. It looks kind of weird at the bottom. I feel like they could have fixed it, maybe added some kind of back frame in there to give him a hunchback, because he doesn't really have a hunchback, he's just leaning forward, and so near his bottom is where it sticks out super far, instead of just the entire back kind of being hunched over. They could have done a better job at that. They definitely could have added like a plastic cover there that gives him a hunchback, and I think that would have looked a lot better from the side. However, most people are probably going to be viewing him from the front.
I have such delights for you. Step up and take a look. You will be the next that I will cook. Yes, come closer, but watch your step, or you will be the next that I collect.
Overall, he's a really cool animatronic and one of my favorites at Home Depot for this Halloween season, and one of my favorites in general for this Halloween season. Something like we've never seen before, and I'm so happy that we got a Goblin. I'd like to get more classic characters like this that we don't see often, like mummies and stuff. It would just be awesome to get more classic things that aren't represented very much for some reason. Now, goblins are something that we really never see, so this was a shock, and it makes me super happy, and it's one of the main reasons I like it. But I feel like this is one of the best ways they could have done a goblin, because he's not just standing there talking, he's got an awesome jump scare feature to him, and he just looks super cool as well. His audio's great too. I love the sounds in the background, very eerie, and he's got a fantastic voice, exactly what I'd expect from a goblin. He's only got 2 phrases, but seeing as he's a jump scare animatronic, it doesn't really matter because he's not one that you're going to stop and stare at. He's one that you're going to walk by, get the jump scare, and move on. So I don't mind that he only has 2 phrases, and I don't mind that they're similar either. A lot of people don't like that. I don't mind it, because for a jump scare animatronic, it really doesn't matter, because most people are not going to stay around for both phrases. He is super cool and has quite a bit of animation. For the price tag of $150, I'd say he's fully worth it. That's not a bad price for this guy at all, as he is 4 feet tall, which isn't massive, but I think it's a good height for his character. He's got side-to-side head turning, mouth movement, and that super effective jump scare. Compare this to something like Bag of Bones at Spirit Halloween, which is just the burlap sack that has that same animation of the skeleton jumping out of it. Also, that skeleton looks a lot worse. You have that for $150, or you can get this full goblin with the burlap sack who pulls the skull out, which I think is a much cooler concept. I think it may come down to personal preference and what you would like to use, because a lot of people may not have a use for a goblin ever, and so they might just want that. But I'm just saying, for price purposes, I think this guy's more worth it because you're getting 2 props in one, which is a lot more worth that same exact price tag, in my opinion. If you want a goblin, if you want a cool character like this, if you can see somewhere that you would use him and that you would enjoy him and that people would get a real kick out of him, I highly recommend you get him. He's a pretty mid-range seller at Home Depot this season. He's not one of the super fast sellers like the 12-footers or Dean the Deathologist, but he's also not a bad seller either. He is basically in the middle. You never know which stores he's going to sell out at and which ones he's not, so I just recommend, as soon as you see him, if you want him, make sure you grab him before he's gone. I hope you all enjoyed this review, Keep howling at the moon, my werewolves.